Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for spending your lunch with me. My hope today is that I can go over some of the, top best practices that you can utilize in your own businesses in order to protect your and reduce personal liability exposure, as well as protect your business, right? Because we all go into business. I'm a business owner too, in order to, make a success of our business, hopefully maybe pass something on to our families. And it's stressful enough running the day-to-day operation. So let's try and give you some peace of mind of some things that you can implement to really safeguard your business and yourself. Before we dive in, just know that every single one of us has a unique business, which means that we also have unique legal needs. And so I encourage you all after this, if you have follow-up questions or it sparks something for you that you think you need to implement, to definitely reach out to an attorney to provide you with personal legal advice. This is just intended to be educational and sort of skirt around the top important issues for you. But definitely consider hiring your own counsel as well as other professional village to support your business, like your CPA, your marketing folks, all those people that help you do what you do and keep you safe doing it. Again, my name is Kristy Cook. My law firm is called Mod Law Firm, and I am a small business and nonprofit attorney. So I help businesses launch. So whether that's filling out all of their paperwork with the Secretary of State and really establishing that business, to helping draft contracts, trademark your awesome brands, review commercial leases and assist with those negotiations, and sort of everything in between. I can also help with the sell or purchase of businesses as well. So that's my background. I've been doing this a really long time, and I've just seen a lot of the challenges that small businesses face when they're starting or when they're growing in their business. There's at each sort of phase of our business life cycle, there are different risks and exposure that we are encountering and need to try and safeguard against, so that the goal is to be proactive in your safeguarding instead of reactive. Because when things go wrong legally in your business, it can derail all your operations because you have to devote all of your focus into addressing whatever sort of fire has arisen. So the goal is to try and set up proactive steps so that those fires don't start in the first place. And that's what my hope is today for our conversation. So first things first, I recognize that many of you already have businesses in place. But one thing to really talk about when we are talking about risk reduction for our businesses is entity selection. So some of us, when we're starting a business, we're trying to consider, should I be a sole proprietor? Should I have an LLC? If I'm an LLC, is there a time that I need to convert that to being a corporation? And all of these questions can feel very overwhelming and intimidating. And the good news with entity selection is that it's not a permanent, what you pick today is not something that you have to be later on. So it can ebb and flow and grow and change with your business. But for most small businesses, and when I say small, I'm not talking just one or two people, there are very large LLCs out there. But most small businesses tend to pick the limited liability company structure. And the reason for that is if you are a sole proprietor, which means that you've just set up shop and you're starting to provide services and take money for those services or sell goods. The second sort of that cash exchanges hands, you've established a sole proprietorship without having to file any paperwork or do anything like that. So it's very easy to set up. But the flip side is the law does not see any distinction between you and your business. So if something goes wrong in your business, you as the individual owner of that business can be sued personally, and all of your personal assets, your home, your car, your savings, etc., can be at risk if you ever had to pay out some sort of damages. So because of that, folks were like, well, this isn't fair. Why would I start a business and take on all that risk? And that's why the law was created, to establish business entities that limit that risk exposure. So the two main ones for doing that and accomplishing that are limited liability company and a corporation. Now, a corporation is an entity that's going to, once it's formed, protect your personal assets from challenges if issues such as what I just described arise. But they're very administratively burdensome to maintain. And so what does that mean? Well, to form it, you have to register with the North Carolina Secretary of State. You fill out the paperwork and you can form your corporation. But then you also have to have bylaws which dictate how the business runs, and you have to follow those bylaws. You also have to have it set up as a hierarchy. So you have shareholders who are the owners of the business. You have officers, and they're the ones that are tasked with sort of managing the day-to-day operations of the business. And then you have, your staff and your board of directors. And so there's all these sort of roles that you have to have. And it can be a lot, especially if you're a sole owner of your business. It is possible to have a corporation and as a single owner and just wear all of those hats, which can just sort of feel very sort of split personality. And it becomes burdensome for a lot of folks. And so because of that, the limited liability company was created. And the great thing about the limited liability company is it's sort of the best of both worlds, from sole proprietorship and corporation. So again, in order to set it up, you file your paperwork with the Secretary of State, and annually you have to sort of renew that paperwork. But from there, you don't have to have all of these sort of split hierarchical roles within the company in order to have the same protection to protect your personal assets and that liability shield that's afforded to you. So administratively, it's very easy to establish and maintain. Additionally, the super cool thing about it is that even though your legal entity structure is a limited liability company, you can tell the IRS to tax you like a corporation, whether that's an S corporation or a C corporation. And so again, you get to have the super simple entity established, but then you can, take the best of all worlds and really customize that. So it's a huge piece of what I like to call the trifecta of business protection. It's a huge piece of initial protection for your entity. And it brings me to another piece of the puzzle, which is, as a business owner, it's essential that you surround yourself with the professional village of folks that can help lift your business up and provide guidance to help you navigate through the business life cycle. One of those super important folks, in addition to your lawyer, is a CPA, and it needs to be someone who focuses on small business or business CPA work. There's a tendency among folks to just sort of hire the accountant who's been handling all of their personal taxes for their life, and that may be okay, but if you're going to do that, regardless who you hire, you want to make sure that it's someone that specializes in business operations and business finance, because the goal of your CPA shouldn't be that you just see them once a year. They really should be an active participant in running your business to help you develop a financial strategy for growth and keeping as much money in your pocket as possible, as opposed to paying it out in high taxes and so forth. So as you're growing and your business is evolving, that person should be integral to your team in helping you really strategize the financial growth of your business as well. So now that we've talked about that, entity structure. The next sort of piece of the trifecta is insurance. We really want to make sure that our businesses are insured to the extent of the risk that we encounter. And again, this is not, as a business owner, you're here because you're really good at car repair, for example. This doesn't mean you also have to be great at understanding the risks that your industry faces. And so to do that, I always recommend that folks reach out to a business insurance broker who is tasked with learning about the intricacies of your business and then going out and shopping around to find the best possible insurance carrier for you. Now, it's great because you don't have to pay that broker. They get paid through whatever insurance is ultimately selected, but they can really guide you through the process. They can also act as your middle person if something were to go wrong and you would need to file an insurance claim. Now, some folks think, okay, well, if I have insurance, I'm good. I don't need to have any of this other stuff because if something goes wrong, my insurance will just come in and take care of it. And that's not necessarily the case. So just like with any other insurance that we have in our lives, car insurance, homeowners insurance, all these things, there are exclusions. There are things that the insurance doesn't cover, and there are deductibles and things like that that you meet, as well as, it may only cover up to a certain dollar amount of issues. So it's great to have, and make sure that if you do ever have to, be faced with some sort of legal claim or business interruption or some sort of damage to your brick and mortar, that insurance can step in and help make you whole again. But it's not going to necessarily protect you from everything. It is an essential component of your business. But to really sort of round out that trifecta, you also need to make sure that you have sound contracts in place with the folks that you encounter in your business. So who are these people? Well, these are folks that are your vendors. These are your employees. Maybe you have an employment agreement with them. Your partners in business. So if you have co-owners, you want to have some sort of agreement that outlines your business relationship together. Your clients, your customers, and in your field in particular, these don't have to be the mammoth long documents, but there should be something in there that at a minimum is limiting liability exposure for certain things, or is putting in what is or isn't included in your services and so forth. And I know that a lot of folks tend to look at contracts as, oh my gosh, these things make my head want to explode. They're a pain to read. If I give this to someone, they're going to think I don't trust them. And I would really challenge you all to think of them, kind of flip the script a little bit on that and think of them instead as relationship preservers. Okay, so the point of the contract is that as you're entering into a relationship with someone, you're identifying all the expectations of both parties, all the promises that you all are making, what is and what isn't included, and if something goes wrong, how that situation is going to be addressed. So it's great because you're entering into this when you're all still friends and happy, everything's going well. So then later on, if something has changed in that relationship, you don't have to get into a he said, she said. You can simply go to the contract that is hopefully well written enough to address the situation that you're in, and just sort of follow the guidelines within that contract to work out the situation. So it's a really great way to preserve relationships. It's also a fantastic way to reduce liability exposure in your business. So if you have a cap on your insurance, for example, then maybe through your contract, you're identifying what that cap is, and you're setting your liability risk to not exceed that, for example. Another great way, so those are the top 3 things that you can do in your business to protect it. Have the right entity structure, have sound contracts in place with the people that you have business relationships with, and be adequately insured to cover the risks that you face. On the insurance piece, just to backpedal a little bit, you definitely also want to revisit that annually as well. As we start businesses, they grow and evolve and change over time, which means that our service offerings, our goods, those also may change. And so it's essential to make sure that as your business is evolving, that your insurance is evolving with it as well, because you don't want to find out something wasn't covered simply because you had failed to let your insurer know that you are conducting that new line of business. So those are the huge sort of top three things that you can do. And then let's dive a little bit deeper into some other things that are going to be helpful for you. So we all, take a long time usually to come up with the name of our business. We try and come up with something catchy and unique and memorable. And it's a huge part of our identity as a business. And so, because of that, a lot of folks feel the need to want to protect and safeguard their brand. And so, how do you do that? Well, the number one way that you can do that is to trademark your either your logo, your slogan, and what most people feel most importantly to trademark is that true word mark, the actual name without all the design of your business. And that means that if you get that trademark, you will have prevented anyone else across the US, if you get a federal trademark, you can also get a state trademark, from using your mark, your brand name, for similar services or goods. So you're locking in that name, and it becomes a true, once you have that trademark, it becomes a true asset of your business. So that's a great way to do things. Another huge thing that you may want to make sure that you're protecting are your trade secrets of your business. So what is a trade secret? And I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not big enough, my business isn't big enough to need to worry about protecting trade secrets. And that's not true. A trade secret is really anything that gives your business a competitive edge over the competition, right? So maybe it's your customer list, it's your pricing information, let's say, if you don't have that displayed, it's your know-how. If there's a certain way that you do your repairs or onboard your clients or set up systems to take care of the folks that you serve, all of those things can be trade secrets where if in your competitor's hands, if they were to implement the same thing, it could really damage your operations as far as being able to attract new customers and grow your business. So those are trade secrets, and those are, we don't have to file anything to protect our trade secrets. All we have to do is make sure that we are doing all we can to safeguard them. So things like having your employees sign a confidentiality agreement, making sure that you have sound cybersecurity practices in place to protect any of the data or know-how that you have in any of your computer systems. Making sure that you're sharing information only to the minimum extent necessary. And, all of these different things, marking something confidential that needs to be confidential, all of these things become evidence of us trying to protect our trade secrets so that later on, if someone were to steal them or wrongly disclose them, we could have an injunction in place to prohibit them from doing so. So those things are really important for protecting your brand. Copyright comes in occasionally. I'm not as sure if it would be as applicable to you all. It tends to be more applicable to creative businesses. But certainly the idea behind copyright is that you're basically protecting your original creations, if you're an artist, your paintings, for example. And I sort of mentioned with the trade secret discussion, making sure that you have sound cyber protections in place. So a huge component of reducing risk exposure in this day and age to all businesses, any business that has a computer, any business that goes on the internet, any business that takes any sort of information about its customers, is to make sure that you have sound cybersecurity measures in place. And you don't have to be an IT expert to set these things up. These are things like making sure that your systems are encrypted, making sure that you have backups of your data so that if it were compromised, it's not going to shut down your business. Making sure that you have antivirus protection and so forth in your systems. And so the reason is twofold. The first I mentioned, which is if you have a data compromise, which who hasn't seen that happen out in the news? It happens every day. And someone were to, stick you with ransomware and lock down all your data, that it's not going to destroy your business. You're not going to have to pay some huge ransom and hope to get that data back. So that's one reason. And the other reason is you have an obligation as a business owner. If you're collecting any information about your customers, name, address, date of birth, credit card information, any of the information that you're taking about them and storing somewhere, you have an ethical obligation to safeguard that information. And if you don't, and if you are breached and compromised, not only is that going to be a huge PR blow to your business, and it tends to make really great, front of news coverage. But customers, clients can sue you for failure to safeguard that information. And you also will have to follow, every state now has different rules about what happens if you have a data breach in your business and personal information is exposed. And you now have to be all hands on deck to follow all of those rules in order to comply with the law. It can set off a trigger of investigations by the Attorney General and so forth. So it's really important to have those in place. And I will say that small businesses in particular are a huge, huge target for hackers, because they understand that businesses that are smaller don't have on support IT staff, right? They don't have an IT person that can come in and make sure that all of these different systems are in place to safeguard the data. And so they are constantly poking and trying to hack into these systems. And a lot of times they're so sophisticated now, we don't even know that they're in your system. They could be in there for months collecting information. So it's really important to connect with an IT professional who can help you set up those safeguards, and then they monitor them for you. And it's a fairly affordable thing, and certainly more affordable than dealing with a breach. You can also now, and should have and purchase with your insurance policy, cyber insurance, which will help cover any breaches that occur. So it's sort of the Wild West of cyber stuff these days, because it's a newer area, but it is a huge risk to folks in their businesses. Also, you definitely want to stay on top of your finances. And this kind of comes in with one great area. If we're sort of thinking of like a Jenga toy, right? The way that you keep that thing standing is to make sure the base stays solid, right? So think of your business the same way. The best way to secure your business is to keep that base of your business and your foundation strong. So what does that mean? Well, that simply means running your business well. That means being an ethical business owner, treating your employees well. Your employees are your biggest risk to your business. They're the ones that are customer facing. They're the ones doing work on your customers' cars, for example. They are your biggest risk area. They also can can come after you for improper employment practices and so forth. So treat your employees well, manage your finances well. If you aren't staying on top of your profits and losses and the growth that's coming with that, not only will you not be able to sort of make projections to continue growing your business, but it will be harder to identify if fraud is occurring or there are some other challenges going on with your business. Part of that also, managing your finances well, filing your taxes timely, and making sure that you're complying with the government regulators that apply to your business. Because no one wants the government, showing up on your doorstep and coming in to audit things. So treating your customers well, right? That's a huge part of running your business well. If we're looking at risk areas, not only can an angry customer hop on Yelp and do a lot of damage to your reputation, they can also sue if they feel like they're being treated improperly. In America, it's very easy to sue someone in small claims court. Basically, if you have the wherewithal to show up at the courthouse and fill out the paperwork properly and serve the person you're suing, you're off to the races with a lawsuit. And as a business owner, you have to deal with it, even if it is, totally bonkers. You did nothing wrong. There's a difference between being sued and being liable. Liable means, okay, they ruled against you, you're going to have to pay up. But being sued means you're going to have to address an issue. And if you ignore it because you think it's not a valid claim or, just sort of ridiculous, the court will enter a default judgment against you, and then you'll still be responsible. So your customers are a huge risk area for you, and part of safeguarding your business and running that business well and treating all these people that you come in contact with honestly, fairly, and openly. Do what you say you're going to do. That is the biggest way that you can reduce risk. And then finally, just to touch on, when we're talking about, I mentioned our employees are our biggest area of risk as business owners. And that is very true. So if you have folks working with you, it is imperative that you make sure that you've classified them correctly. There tends to be a lot of confusion between, can I bring this person on as an independent contractor, or do I have to bring them on as an employee? And I've had clients come to me and say, well, they want to be treated like an independent contractor, and I want to treat them like an independent contractor. So that's what we've decided we're going to do. And the law doesn't work that way. The law is going to look at how you treat that person. To what amount of control do you have over that person's job performance? Are you telling them when they have to clock in and clock out? Are you providing their tools? Are you telling them how they should be doing their job, providing uniforms? Sort of, the more you micromanage, essentially, the greater the odds are that the law will treat you as an employer. And that means that you are subject to paying them minimum wage, making sure that you're complying with, the wage and hour laws, and all these things associated with having an employee. And if you don't, if you misclassify the person and something goes wrong, they leave, they're disgruntled, they can go and they can file a claim with the state. And the state will come in, they'll open an investigation, and the state isn't just going to look at that one relationship. They're going to look at the way you treat all of your employees and or independent contractors. And if you've gotten it wrong, they will apply fines and penalties. There'll be back payments and so forth. So it's just sort of this nightmare issue. And so because of that, when in doubt, make sure that you're engaging with an employment attorney who can assist you in properly classifying your employees. So all of that is, of course, not intended to scare you. or make you feel like it's impossible to run a business and not run into trouble. That is not the case at all. The idea is to inform yourself of the risks that are out there and do what you can to alleviate those risks, or at least be aware of them and just make an active decision to accept the risks that you're taking on. And so I know that was a lot to send your way and sort of dump on you. And I do have these presentation tips sort of summarized that we can provide, but all of that is now sort of swimming around in your head and hopefully creating some, little things that as you go through your business will help you set up your spidey sense, that little tingle that maybe you should look further into something besides before dipping your toe into it. But I want to take this time now. We have some time to really just let you all, ask some questions, or if there's something I can help clarify, bring it on. Oh yeah, a great question came in about COVID restrictions. So this is definitely a Wild West area. Obviously, we haven't gone through something like this before. It's an area that guidance is going to change and evolve over time. Of that, I am certain. But right now, generally the same way that employers sort of set qualifications for, who's the minimum qualifications to hire somebody. The same thing can be true with these COVID restrictions. So I won't be surprised if I start seeing, that employees it's mandatory that they're vaccinated and so forth. But it is going to be one of those things that sort of come up from a customer perspective. At a minimum, you want to make sure that you're complying with whatever the sort of state guidance is, and a better practice it would be to go with CDC guidance. If it is more restrictive than the state, basically go with the more restrictive approach. I've seen some folks go so far as to have people sign waivers and so forth. In your industry, it's so kind of in and out that, that would be sort of an unreasonable ask. But as a business owner of businesses where people are definitely, coming in and you can't just be virtual, you definitely want to make sure that at a minimum you're complying with those recommendations and documenting how you're complying with them, so that if someone were to come back and say, oh, I got COVID at your location, first of all, how do you even prove that? But you can at least show that you are following best practices. So I hope that answers your question. It's a big question. What is the current quarantine period, and is there federal payroll credits to cover this period for their wages? So that is an area that I would refer you to speak with an employment attorney on. Again, this area is changing a lot and is not something that I specialize in. I'm sorry. You should be able, though, to also do a search. I think that the quarantine period is changing, as are the rules with who's covered and can unemployment or short-term disability or anything like that apply.
Okay, so instead of typing, I was going to ask, I think I'm doubled up here. Hold on. Can you hear me? Hold on a second. Now Steve's barking. Okay. Oh, there we go. I know what's going on. There we go. I was actually just in a group conversation where people were asking about their like people were looking for a specific business and asking if there was a dentist locally that the whole staff was vaccinated, or, you know, some businesses I've seen where like a shop has an employee who tests positive for COVID, and then maybe like a customer knows that somebody has COVID, but who, and then in part of that conversation, there were people who were giving contradictory advice on the HIPAA privacy rules. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, because I know that it'll probably come up with our members over time.
Mhm. Yeah, you know, as an employer, we are tasked with protecting the privacy of our staff and our employees, and yeah, that would go towards that. You know, you can't be disclosing specifics about individual employees. You can talk to policy. You know, it's our business's policy that, you know, these certain things are met, but you can't give out specific information about your individual staff.
So the business is covered by saying that they don't want to give that information out, and that is correct.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's, I know that a lot of them were gonna worry about that, and I thought that was odd, so I just wanted to make sure that we knew the correct
Mhm.
rules.
A question came in about, can you offer an employee bonus to employees if they're willing to get vaccinated? And again, I'm not an employment expert. I think generally the bonuses, you know, there's flexibility there. Note the bonuses are taxable income, of course. But yeah, it's you know, I think it's a creative way to do things, and I would just double check that with an employment attorney. I think that it's definitely something that folks are starting to consider for existing employees. So how do we get our existing employees to do, you know, X versus all new employees, in order to be eligible for employment, have to have these sorts of vaccinations. Like I had a client in Oregon, because I'm bi-coastal, I work in Oregon, North Carolina, who required that folks have their tuberculosis inoculation, right? So it shouldn't be any different. And I can't see why it's going to not be allowed to require folks to get that vaccination as a condition of employment.
So a bonus will just kind of sweeten the deal, I suppose.
Yeah. But again, you know, every business is different, and this is just informational, and it would behoove you to, you know, get with an employment attorney and come up with a specific sort of COVID plan, right? We all went through the specifics of, okay, what I need to do to get staff to come back. And now that we have a vaccine, it's just sort of this like round two of, okay, how do we address all these new things that no one's ever had to deal with before?
I have a question. So say, and this is kind of changing the topic, so if anybody has a question related to the topic, just go ahead and interrupt me. But say an accident were to happen in a shop, like a car fell on somebody and stuff like that. What are the immediate steps that should be taken? I mean, other than the obvious, you know, call 911, get all that kind of stuff. But what legally should they do to deal with the situation?
Yeah, for all injuries, whether it's employees, whether it's customers, you want to make sure that, yeah, when you've done those initial sort of 911 things, you know, deal with the issue immediately, but then really following up with documenting what happened. So anyone who's a witness, whether it's staff, if there's other, you know, customers that you can get to, also document it and have them fill out an incident report, right? So you're just collecting all the information while it's still fresh in people's minds. Then you also immediately want to get in touch with your insurer. A lot of them have rules in place that say that as soon as you become aware that of the potential for a claim or a lawsuit, you need to let them know as soon as possible. Some even have timeframes that you have to let them know within. And if you miss that time frame, then you won't get, they won't cover it. So it's best to get them involved immediately. Also, the person who's injured, make sure that you're giving them your insurance information as well, so that they can call and, you know, open a potential claim if they need to. And then from there, your insurer should really direct you through the process. They, part of the insurance is handling the defense, right? So they're gonna tell you all the other things that you need to do, but getting immediately while recollections are fresh, those incident reports completed, filled out, saved, documented, and then of anyone that happened to be a witness, and then getting insurance involved. And if you think that there was some sort of reason it happens, like let's say, what if, you know, your employee was negligent? What if your employee showed up, was intoxicated somehow, or anything like that that can make it look like there was some sort of negligence that could be your fault as a business owner. You also really want to dive into that more as well. So if it's someone, for example, that you thought was intoxicated on the job, and maybe because of that, they pulled a lever they shouldn't have pulled, or I don't know how these things work. You know, do you need to pull that person and put them on administrative leave until you've done some sort of investigation, and so forth, just to basically show that you're doing all you can. On the flip side, if you don't see that it was anybody's fault, was the machinery that the car was on faulty or something like that? So, you know, it's probably good to maybe take that out of commission until you've had it thoroughly reviewed and investigated by whoever, you know, can look at those and make sure that they're functioning properly.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
John asked in here a few questions about drug testing. Do you know the laws for North Carolina in regards to drug testing? And any injury reported required a drug test within an hour. Is that okay?
Yeah, drug testing is okay in North Carolina. It should be in all of your, you know, job descriptions, and you know that random drug testing is a thing. And your job description or your offer, whatever it is that you provide, your employee handbook, wherever it lives, you should also have that policy that when an injury is reported, drug testing is required within an hour. And the great thing about the employee handbook and having all your policies and procedures in there is that you want to make sure that your employee has signed the handbook, and that you have that documented. But yeah. Any other questions? Any came in through Facebook or anything?
Let me check here.
And while she's looking, so I know I've sort of deferred on this employment issue a lot. And the reason is because this COVID stuff is very specialized. I do employment work, but it's just at a high level. It's more of a generalist. So things like drafting handbooks, helping onboard, those sort of high level things. But as far as investigations, all this COVID craziness that we're all having to deal with, these really specialized or evolving areas of the law really should have someone who is only focused on employment law working on. And so there's someone that I recommend over and over and over again. She's outstanding, is Mimi Soule. It's Soule, and it's Soule Employment Law Firm. She only does employment law, and she lives and breathes all the COVID stuff that's happening right now. She's a fantastic human, and I highly recommend her for the specialized employment stuff. Absolutely.
So one question came in, and it was in regards to apprentices, do you have to have any additional legal coverage when there's an apprentice that is below 18. I know it's kind of getting into the insurance realm and making sure that they're covered and what they can be, what they're able to do. But yeah, I guess, is there anything additional?
Yeah, so that is a very specialized question, and definitely one, you're right, that you'd want to consult with on your insurance. As far as, obviously they can work for you, that's okay. Industry specific, I'm not sure if there are rules around how folks who are in an apprentice program like that, you as their guide, rules that you have to follow. I would have to look into that, into the actual industry specific requirements with regard to supervision and things like that. And I would assume that your insurance carrier would, if there are such rules, would default to those as well as being a condition of coverage. But it's definitely, if it's something that you haven't let your insurance provider know that you offer as a service to those folks, then you definitely want to make sure that they know that you're doing that, and they should provide you with some guidance on how to maintain coverage for mistakes and things like that that could happen with them, or if they're injured or so forth.
Thank you. Any other questions out there?
Well, I really applaud the questions that have come in have been fantastic. It's clear that you all are really taking your obligations to heart, which is that foundational piece of running your business well. And I know that a lot of these experts who can sort of answer questions are going to be willing to, chat with you, and even if it's just to answer questions, you can reach out and they'll be willing to help. And so, those are important things. A question came in: changing an S corp to an LLC, must we liquidate? No. And so with your S corp, does that mean that you are in Inc? Your business is in Inc?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've got several corporations, but some of them are more than 30 years old, and I wish they would have been formed as LLCs. My accountant wants me to liquidate and retitle them as LLCs, but I don't want to go through that process. And it's very lengthy, as you can imagine, with inventory and all the things that you would have acquired. So my newer corporations have all been set up as LLCs, taxed as a subchapter S, which is the way to go. But I, again, have some old ones that are still working. I have to file Secretary of State every year and all those things associated. And I guess I can leave them alone, but I would feel better. Some of them report to a holding company that's its own corporation. And I don't know how much you're into QSS and QSS subsidiaries and all that kind of stuff. But I just wondered, have you done any conversion of a existing S corporation to an LLC, and what cost and timeframes would be associated in your estimation?
Yeah, it can definitely be done, but you're right, it does have some tax consequences. And so my assumption would be that if your accountant is telling you that it would have to be liquidated, I assume that the information they're giving you is the best financial route to make that happen. But it can be done, and these are converted all the time. It's just a matter of, because it is such a long-term existing entity, really sort of figuring out if it's worth the hassle, like you said.
So can you dissolve one and recreate it as an LLC and just move the assets over?
Yeah. I mean, there's still going to be a tax hit, right? That you would have with winding down a business. But yeah, if you were to dissolve it and then start a brand new LLC, your equity contribution into the LLC would be the assets that you're putting into it. So.
Do you do that kind of thing, or have you done that or not? Is that something you work with?
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of entity work. Yes, I do a lot of formations and wind downs, and so lots of good stuff. And it's www.modlawfirm.com. And I wish you all the best in this, crazy COVID world. I know that this is a major adventure for all of you, given the work that you're doing. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Maddie.
All right, thank you, Kristy, and thanks everybody for joining us and all of your questions. And it looks like Kristy just put in her PDF file, so if anybody wants to take a look at that and see what she has to offer, go ahead. And if you have any additional questions that pop in, feel free to send them to me and I will get them over to Kristy for you. But thanks again, everybody, and hope you enjoyed your lunch hour today.
Thanks so much, Kristy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.